All right, be the market expert and kicking it off with really just this Resi Club article that they just put out today and or yesterday, and it says 54 of the nation's 200 largest housing markets are now above pre-pandemic inventory, and it was just 17 markets last year. So keep in mind that everything that we compare to is pre-pandemic. We compare a lot to 2019. 2019 is where we're going to really evaluate and base most of all of our data off of. When we start talking about like 2019 data, 2019 data is what we would consider a normal market. We have to keep in mind that 2020 got weird, right? We had the shutdowns happening, and keep in mind, especially here in Colorado, right? Like, what did that look like? I mean, it was pretty quick for us. We were deemed essential within 24 hours, and as real estate agents, and yet it still got different because no one knew what the world was going to look like even tomorrow. And then we had 2021 where money was pretty much free. Fast forwarding, and interest rates skyrocketed to the fastest and quickest the rates have ever gone up in the United States. Not as high, right? They've obviously been higher, but the velocity of how quickly they went up shocked a lot of systems. And then we have lived in this higher interest rate period with elevated home prices. And so we have an affordability issue. So 2020 through 2024, when we're talking about that market's weird. This is not a normal market that we've been in by any extent of the imagination. So when we're making comparisons, we go to 2019. 2019, we consider a normal market. And so 54 of the nation's 200 largest markets are now above pre-pandemic. So we fast forward and we're going through here, and it says at the height of the pandemic boom, housing demand was so fierce that homes sold so quickly they barely had time to register. We know this, right? Like as we're having conversations with our consumers, and they're talking about their neighbor's home, right? Because it's always their neighbor's home, and they had sold in 5 minutes, or they had sold uh, they sold before Monday rolled around. They sold over the weekend or whatever that looks like. And with that being said, that's pretty true. And that's what makes a lot of collecting data hard because it does need time to register. And so as we're looking at this, we have to keep in mind that some things don't capture only because when they are priced to sell and they don't land on the actives for them being able to scrape the data from the MLSs, that's kind of where we run into some of these things. So when we're looking at it, right, we see October 2021, right? Money was free, and we're looking at 565,707 active homes in the United States. And that's still 53% less than what we saw October 2019 at 1.2 million homes. I mean, thinking about that, when we're talking about the reason why home prices are elevated and they're staying elevated, even with interest rates, yes, they've come down a little bit, yet the home prices that we're seeing today are still the highest home prices that we've seen as a nation. And yes, they've come down a little bit compared to what they were in 2021. Yet, this is one of the biggest reasons right here, even with interest rates fluctuating, right? 7, 6%, right? They don't hit six, but 6 to 7%, they're going back and forth and they're kind of looking like a little bit of a roller coaster. This is the reason why there are no homes for sale when we're looking at inventory looking like this. So as we're going through, here it is, right? Among the 254. So this is where we're living right now. And guess what? Colorado, we own a couple of these markets. And so 54 of these markets, we have higher inventory than what we had in 2019. If we were to look back a year ago, there's only 17. A year prior to that, 2022, 14, 2021, and 2020, inventory was disappearing. 2020 was really just because like the world shut down. We had no clue what was going on, right? 2021, money was free, and we could actually go out and borrow money at phenomenal rates and go purchase homes. So let's look through this. It says most of the housing markets where active inventory had climbed back to above pre-pandemic levels. and the Sun Belt, right? We got to think about the Sun Belt. And when we're looking at this, we're really just talking about these areas that we're going in, like Florida, Alabama, I would say parts of Texas, right? That we're going through and we're looking at this. And those are where a lot of people moved when we had these digital nomads, if you will, right? These people that were going through and they could work from home. And we saw a lot of people take advantage of that, right? Where they were saying, hey, I can work from home, I can work from anywhere. And I'm going to move where the cost of living is significantly lower, even though I'm getting paid for the cost of living for the state that I am currently in. And so where they go, they went down southeast, right? Like that's where people went. And so the Sun Belt, right? We're going through and we're looking at this thing. So Huntsville, Alabama, we can see that this is 5 years past 2019, right? This is October data. So everything we do is talking about rear view facing because no one has a crystal ball and it takes a while to gather this data and to scrape the data. So we're looking at 85% higher. Texas, in Temple, we're talking 75%. Lubbock, 72%. All right, let's look at Colorado Springs. 55% more inventory today in Colorado Springs than it was in 2019. We go down a little bit further, Denver, Aurora, Lakewood, it kind of lumps all those areas in together, 24% more inventory. We scroll down a little bit further, you can see here's Boulder. Boulder's at 11% more inventory than what we had in 2019. And we go a little bit further, we got Fort Collins, 4% more inventory. So when we're going through and we're looking at these different things, we are a few of these 54 where we have more inventory. So this is kind of what's interesting, right? We're seeing this happening. We know that interest rates, why they pretended like they wanted to go lower for a little bit, and the Fed's been lowering rates, right? It hasn't had a direct impact on what has gone on with where interest rates are for being able to go out and purchase a home. So what we're seeing though is there are people that are on the sidelines, right? There are people that have been waiting, right? They've been waiting through 2022, right? There's going to be a housing crash, Airbnb bust, silver tsunami, right? All these different things. 2023, waiting for the same things to happen, didn't happen. 2024, waiting for the same, right? Like the silver tsunami's got to come. All of these baby boomers are going to sell their house at the exact same time and it's going to flood the market. Didn't happen, won't happen. Airbnb bus. All these people own these Airbnbs and now they're not making as much money as they were, so they have to sell them. Nope, didn't happen. Not going to happen. Right? The housing market crash. Right? The homes, we're living in a bubble. All the prices have just been blown out of proportion. Nope, we're not seeing anything there either. And so I think all these people that have been getting their news, right? It doesn't matter from where, Fox, CNN, YouTube, Twitter, insert whatever here. They've all been pushing the exact same narrative. And with that being said, none of those narratives are coming true because here's the thing. What we do know is that these people get paid by clicks. These people get paid by viewership. And what sells and what gets clicked is when we start pushing a narrative that's scary, right? Like that's where people are clicking and they're looking and they're getting their information. And if they were to say like everything looks good, like no one cares, they're like cool. But if we're pushing a narrative of doom and gloom, that's when people are clicking on and they're looking and they're like, oh my God, what's coming? All right, maybe I should wait, right? We're going to see this recession that's going to hit, and all these homes are going to hit the market. It's going to look like 2008, right? The Big Short. It's going to come all over again. Somehow we're going to get sloppy with our mortgage standards, and anybody that wants to go buy a house can buy a house. And if you want 3, 4 houses, you can go do that. That's just not the case. We've had these people sitting on the sidelines. And when we're looking at this, everyone, I think this is one of the important things that as we're going through right now, we're in the season of renewal. We're in the season of renewal. There should be reasons we should be reaching out to our database and having conversations. Happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's, Happy Hanukkah, Happy insert anything here. And we're going through and we're just figuring out like we're the real estate economists of choice. And we're asking them, what are your real estate goals in the next 3, 5, 10 years? Right? We don't need to be, what's happening. Do you want to buy a house in 2025? Like, yes, absolutely. I'd love to help you. And what we need to see is we live in a state in Colorado that has at least four of these metros, right? We're talking about Colorado Springs, Denver, Aurora, Lakewood, all lumped together. We're going through Boulder. We're looking, we have Fort Collins. Oh, we have Greeley. I skipped over Greeley. There's five. There are five of these 54 metros that we touch because your real estate license is good in all of those metros, that our people are raising their hands and their homes are on the market right now, even though they understand that there's less of a buyer pool out there with the elevated rates. We need to be having these conversations, right? While we understand that rates are elevated, we need to be going through and having the conversations. Then we're going through and we're kind of looking into this thing. And here are out of the top 200 again, these are the markets where active inventory level remains the lowest. And as we're going through and we're looking and we're looking and we're looking, and if we were scrolling through and checking this thing out, we're not on the list anywhere here, right? So we're nowhere on this list. We have inventory now. So as we're going through, we're having these conversations with our consumers. We're figuring out what their motivations are. What is their 3, 5, 10-year plan for buying and selling real estate? Is it an investment property? Is it they want a cabin up in the mountains, right? Are they leaving Colorado because the cost of living has gotten too high that they're going to the Midwest, right? All these things that we're having these conversations with, because as we're looking at this thing, this map tells me that this data that we're looking at tells me people in Colorado are listing their homes. And so I think we have this narrative right now that, the market's bad. The market isn't bad. Now there's more inventory. We're getting more into a balanced market here in Colorado, and that's a good thing, right? That means that buyers and sellers are going to come to the table together. They're going to be able to agree on more things together. This is what's interesting about where we are right now as an industry is you as real estate agents have never had so much power to negotiate as we have today. It's pretty cool. We have the ability to go negotiate seller concessions. Tried doing that in 2021, right? These people were wanting to give the naming rights to their children away to go buy a house. And right now you have the ability to say, hey, seller, if you want to sell your house, my consumer is looking for $15,000, $20,000 from you to actually buy your home. You have the ability to negotiate your commission at a rate that you've never been able to negotiate before, right? Like we have agents right now that are negotiating 3+% on their co-op. And we've never really had this in the past, right? With the blanket offers of compensation. Now we're seeing that there are literally people right now in our state, and we are seeing these numbers higher than they've been in the last 5 years for inventory. We need to be having the conversations. Now, let me come off that high horse and off that pedestal, and let's look at this. Let's talk about, as we're going through, it says, is home construction entering a slowdown? And we're going to jump over to the next slide here in a second, but we're looking at this thing. It says housing activity at COVID-19 recession levels now. Okay, cool. So nationwide, we are seeing less housing permits. More specifically, they're going through and they're talking about single family starts for the nation. But if we were to look, and we live in the West region, right? When we're comparing West to Midwest, we are the West. And so we're the West region here, and we're at 4.6%. We have 4.6% more home starts versus last year. So this is year over year data. And again, it's October because this is how long it really takes to scrape the data and to put it into these graphs. And so we're sending it over. And so we're seeing more homes being started. What's interesting is if we were to jump over to this next one, and it's back over to home builder confidence, is home builder confidence gets a post-election boost. All right, so we're looking at this thing, and there's some thoughts around it, right? If we were to go in here and we're talking about it, they're talking about the different things that we could potentially see with Republicans having the White House and Congress. This isn't an Harris or a Trump thing at this point. This is truly a Republican thing. And so when they're going through and they're talking about historical data, and they're talking about what it means between or the Democrats owning the White House and the Congress versus Republicans owning the White House and the Congress. This is why we saw a lot of things happen, especially with interest rates. All right. So first and foremost, when we saw interest rates go up the way that they did, even though we've been seeing the Fed lowering rates, it really was in anticipation for a red sweep, right? That's truly what it was. In the grand scheme of things, it was because historically, what we start to see is we start to see regulations start disappearing and more money coming into the economy. Now, with that being said, inflation will go up like it does. It happens when more money starts coming into the economy, inflation starts going up. Regulation is anticipated to go down as well. So that's why this confidence has gone up, is that home builders feel more confident that there's going to be less regulation. I know that one of the platforms that Trump talked about for housing, because housing was a huge topic inside of the election trail this year, was around federal land, and who knows what that really looks like. Who knows, right? There really is nothing that we can really look at right now, but we're going to see. We have 4 years to kind of see what's going to go on with this, and it will be interesting. What you also see, like as we're going in here, it says this. It says this report also found that fewer builders are using incentives in November, with the share dropping from 62 to 60%. Okay, so that's not a huge drop. I guess if we were talking about like the nation, I mean, we're talking about a significant amount of homes. Additionally, the average price deduction fell to 5%, down from 6% a month prior, with 31% of builders reporting that they cut prices. The percentage has remained relatively flat since July. Okay, cool. So we're talking that they're no longer dropping the price as much as they were. It doesn't say that they're not. And so when we're going through and I'm thinking about this, it also doesn't say that they're getting rid of incentives. They're saying they're seeing fewer builders with incentives. And I think that we're going to see some bigger push, especially in Colorado. We have inventory. So now we have new builds and resales competing for the same eyes because we have less buyers out there. And what we have to keep in mind when we're talking about new builds is new build incentives are a lot more favorable than a mortgage lender's incentives, right? When we're going through, we have to keep in mind that most new builds are their own bank. And so as we're going through and we see home builder confidence going up post election, they are still competing against resale homes. So one of the things that we need to be doing is we need to go through, go have these conversations, figure out who our builders are, figuring out what their inventory looks like, and figuring out what they are offering. Like we're seeing some crazy stuff out there, guys. Like I've seen things pop up, 4 or 5% interest rates on new builds right now. So you get a brand new home and you're paying 4 or 5% on your money, and you're going through and no one's lived in this thing before. There's going to be less competitions, right? We don't have spec homes in Colorado for the most part, right? Your spec home is truly the model home after everything else is sold. That would be, in my eyes, a spec home. Everything else is build to own. So you go through, you walk through the model home, you pick, you're like, okay, cool, I like this. You go find your dirt lot. You say, that's the dirt lot that I want. They tell you how much that dirt lot's going to be. You pick your house, you put your house on top of it, and a year later, you get the house. And so, what are we doing when we know homes are historically appreciating 4%? So they're still building equity through that whole time, in theory. We need to be making sure that we're going out, having the conversations, figuring out where these new builds are going so that we can have these conversations through the rest of the year, figuring out what people's 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year plan is, getting this information, putting people on these campaigns on, hey, I have 4 new builds that have popped up with rates at 4 or 5%, builder incentives, and appliance packages. Reply to this email if you'd be interested in know more information, right? Like that's what we need to be doing. The real estate economist of choice, pushing conduit. It's saying home builders' confidence has gone up. They're still going to build. and yet they are competing. We live in Colorado. They are competing with resales. There's more inventory. So while they are in a higher confidence, they still have competition. I thought this was interesting as well. Like I was looking through here, and it says share of renters paying under $1,000 hits record lows, according to Redfin. And again, we live in Colorado, so we know that there's probably no one paying $1,000 in Colorado. But we look at this, and it's only 32% of renter households currently pay less than $1,000 in monthly rent, a sharp decline from 35% in 2022 and 50% from 2012. Okay, so 2012, I mean, that's a bigger, more significant number. We're talking about 50%, but we're talking what, we're talking 12 years. I mean, this is 12 years ago as we're looking at this. But if we go through and we dive into it a little bit more, it says roughly 1 in 3 renter households pay under $1,000 of rent. So if we're looking at this, we're actually this yellow line. We're this $2,000 to $2,900 for a room in a shared house. Yeah, seriously, for a room in a shared house, but it's a mother-in-law suite. It's actually in the backyard, right? Like this is above a garage somewhere. Um, but as we're looking at this thing, we're living in this 2000 to 2900. I'm just going to pull up Altus data real quick. Here you go. Here's Arvada. Here's 8 triple lot 2 specifically, because I think I actually put that zip code in. Yeah, 8 triple lot 2. 8 triple lot 2, we're at 2700. So we literally we're in this yellow line right now, and we're seeing like where we're really seeing a big thing is 1000 to 199. What's interesting about this though is I feel like I've had a lot of conversations with people on this call about, investing in real estate. So when we're talking about investing in real estate, I think what's interesting to think about, interesting and unfortunate at the exact same time. But I think with the unfortunate part, it has opportunity. So we're looking at this thing, and it says the report reveals that 47.9% of renter households now pay between $1,000 and $2,000. 14% pay 2,000 to 29. That's where we are, and 5% pay $3,000 or more. The median asking rent stands at $1,600. Okay, and it says that's about 20% higher than pandemic levels. All right, so 2020 moratorium on raising rents and everything else that were happening, evictions and everything else. And so we're 20% higher in like 3 years, right? So when we're looking at this thing, I think some of the things we should keep in mind is it leads off with Oklahoma. All right, so let's talk about Oklahoma. They're making the news right now, which is interesting, right? I don't know if anyone's been watching anything, but they're making the news for some of the things they're doing in public schools. But let's look at it. So Oklahoma City leads 50 largest metropolitan areas with the highest share of renter households paying under $1,000. 64%. So what this tells me, right? Then we go to New Orleans, we go to Cleveland, we go to Louisville, Kentucky. If I am thinking about this and I know that we have frustrated money in Colorado, right? Like our money does not go as far. And yet what we also know is that real estate is a vehicle for wealth. What does it look like to actually go look into those states, those cities, specifically those metros, and to go see if there is an investment property for you to go purchase? Right, because when I'm looking at this thing and I'm seeing that someone's paying under $1,000 a month, that tells me that housing is affordable as well. Because if someone was having to pay $3,000, $4,000 a month for a mortgage, they're not renting the house out for $1,000. So as I'm looking at this thing, what I would probably be doing if I was looking to start a rental portfolio, I would look in these areas. These are the areas that I would go take a look in, and it tells me that there is a lot of people needing rent, and it has affordability issue because what we also know is for the most part, mortgage companies aren't going out and they're not lending under $100,000. All right. And so what I'm doing is I'm looking at these areas and I'm looking to see, okay, so there's probably some affordability things. So do I have some money in the bank to where I can go actually purchase some of these houses? I probably use the BRRRR method. That's a conversation for another day, but I would probably go BRRRR and I would go find a home. I'd rehab it, I'd rent it, I'd refinance the money back into it, tie it into a mortgage. When we're talking about these price points, like it's pretty affordable at this point. And we have to keep in mind that a big portion of the demographic in that area is renters because they cannot afford a house. And this would be a perfect opportunity. So it's a conversation for another day. But with this information, again, we live in the 14%, because even in Arvada, we're at $2,700 per month. And what I think that this tells me is there's opportunities specifically in some of these areas for me to go look and to actually just start building wealth. But let's look at Logan Moshami, the lead analyst for Housing Wire, again, rear view facing data. This came out on Friday. And so as I'm looking at this, we're not going to talk about the 10-year yield. We're not going to talk about the mortgage yield spreads, but let's talk about purchase application data. And it says when looking at purchase application data, he's always trying to find mortgage rates range that can make housing demand grow. And so as we're looking at this thing, it says last year when mortgage rates fell from 8% to the mid sixes, we saw demand pick back up. And he says it wasn't spectacular, right? Like we're living in the basement, right? That's one of the biggest things that we're keeping in mind is that, again, we have an affordability issue right now. And it's not because interest rates have been the highest they've ever been, yet we do have home prices that are the highest they've ever been. Yes, they've come down a little bit, but when we're talking about where we live in Colorado, $600,000, $700,000 with 7% interest rates, it's pricey, right? And so we're going through here and we're looking and we're seeing that we're kind of on track at 2023, but we're not where 2022 was. And again, 2022, I think there was a little bit of disbelief still on like where interest rates were because again, they spiked, right? We can actually see the spiking area right around here and they started to dip off. We have some seasonality as well. Keep in mind that we're in a very seasonal industry. With that seasonal industry, though, I think that 2020 broke a lot of people, especially with the seasonality. Yet we're seeing seasonality coupled with interest rates. And I think that's the reason for the slowdown. So I think what we need to do is we need to just kind of watch. The Fed has lowered the rates. And while there isn't a direct correlation for what you can go get a mortgage for right now, I think what we do need to keep in mind is eventually it's going to get lower. And I think the reason why it's staying elevated right now is that we have to keep in mind that banks lose money if people refinance. And so if there's people in at 7%, 7.2%, and the bank drops it down to 6.5 to 6%, which I think they could do. In the grand scheme of things, I think a bank could do that right now if they wanted to, but they're not going to yet because people start to refinance and banks start to lose money. So what we're going to see is here over the next couple months, we're going to start to see interest rates go down. And again, as we're going through and we're figuring out what is holding our consumers back from purchasing, we're going to find out that it is their monthly payment for the type of home that they need that's going to fit their family's lifestyle. Because again, I think a lot of people right now, it's a long-term thing, right? What will sustain my family for the next 10, 15, 20 plus years? Or we have a lot of people that are looking for their forever home. They find their forever home. The interest rate makes sense. We're the real estate economists of choice. We are in emotional proximity to them when they're looking to transact business. We are getting them the information. We are pushing out the data to them. They're going to come to us. But again, nothing extraordinary right now. We had this little dip right here back in November, but it's come back down and we're kind of on track for 2023. We'll see how this thing plays out. I think it'll probably stay in line with 2023. 2025 is where we're going to see some things change again. Second part of 2025 is where a lot of people way smarter than me believe that we're going to start to see 5.5 is kind of where we land, and that's going to be the new normal. Everyone, 3% was a gift from God. We're not going to see those anymore. So when we're having those conversations, just know your audience. If you can say that to them, yet that's kind of where we are. So looking at this thing, pending sales. Here we are. Like, look at this. We have elevated prices, we have elevated interest rates. And as we're going through 2024, we still have more sales pending right now. there's more inventory, and we have more pending sales. Again, the media has pushed this narrative that it's not a good time to buy, and yet people are tired of waiting on the sidelines. Nothing has happened for many years at this point, right? We're talking 2022, nothing happened. 2023, nothing happened. 2024, nothing happened. How long can people sit on the sidelines? And we're actually seeing this right now to where it's higher. It's elevated more than 22. It's elevated more than 23. We're going to kind of see this thing kind of play out. 331,000 homes nationwide are under contract. Now, if we were to look at just the inventory, right, we're sitting at just a little bit less inventory than we were the week prior. And we're still significantly higher than we were this time last year, right? We go from 721 to 722. So we got a little bit more inventory. But if we were to look versus last year, it's a pretty significant jump. Now, we do have to keep in mind that as we're going back, we're going to go all the way back to 2015, 1.1 million homes this time last year. But here we are, 2024, 27% more homes versus last year this time right now. And we're inching up. We're inching up to 2017, 2018, 2019 pre-pandemic levels, considered a normal market. This is what we want to see. This makes negotiating, this makes everything a lot better for our consumers and for us, quite frankly, right? While it was fun to sell a house in 2021 because we knew that multiple offers, we got to pick and choose. It was no fun to buy a house in 2021. It was a lot harder. And so, with more inventory hitting the market, more conversations, more strategies, this is a market that we want to be in. Single family new listings data, you can kind of see this seasonality. We are picking up a little bit. We went way lower than 2022 and 23, but it's still popping up a little bit more. 51,000 new listings hit the market. Now, if we do look at price cuts, we do know that 1/3 of all homes take a price cut in a year. We're sitting at 38%. So we're slightly higher, but we're still within that range of 1/3 of all homes. And you can kind of see that right here. We are this line right here at 38.8%. We are lower than the last couple of years. And keep in mind that 2022 was elevated because, again, people had their home on the market, interest rates shot up, and they were planning on selling their home like it was 2021. And they had motivations to put their home on the market, and they had to decrease their home so they could actually sell it. So that's why we're not in 2022, but we look more like 2023 right here. So then it says, like, hey, what are we looking for this week? Because again, this was Friday's article, and it says the critical data for next week is the housing data, the builder's confidence, and housing starts data are essential. We just saw that housing starts are down, and yet the builder confidence has gone up. So we already saw that report. It came out. And it says housing permits and starts are already at an early COVID-19 recession level, and we are working through the backlog. Yet in Colorado, we're seeing it's picking up. We live in the West, and so we saw that was about 4% increase. So we're going through. This is what we're going to do. And it says builders feel about higher mortgage rates because, according to the economic models, when residential construction workers start losing their jobs, recession isn't far away. I also saw an article, I don't remember what article it was. I think it was probably this home builder article. It was interesting as well. That they actually went through, and I think they said like 22%. I don't see it right now. It might be in this one. 22%. Nope, wasn't that high. It's 13%. It says data from the American Immigration Council shows that 13.7% of all construction labor jobs in 2022 involved undocumented workers. And then it goes on, it says mass deportation would exacerbate a labor shortage. We'll see what that looks like, right? Because everything that we're hearing coming out, it'll be interesting to kind of see. But with what we're looking at, I don't think that we're going to see a mass labor shortage. But what we do know, again, is we deal with the highest price tag item that most Americans purchase in their life. In Colorado, we're one of the highest, right? When we're talking about a $700,000 price point. And when we're going through and we're talking about this, if we do start to see homes dip off, which we're not, the data says we're not, then what's going to happen is we will see laborers be some of the first people to lose their jobs because construction homes aren't going to be built. And drive around Colorado, homes are being built, and they take about a year for that to be completed. So I don't think that we're going to see this in Colorado. And yeah, we'll just have to keep our eye on it and see kind of what's going on. Here's your interest rates, right? So we can kind of see, oh, look, there's a little bit of a dip. We're below 7%, which is exciting. So you're conforming, your 30-year conforming. So conventional 6.8, FHA we're at 6.3, which is kind of exciting. Yes, it has gone up a little bit. If we look at 3 months, it's gone up significantly, but we haven't seen anything truly crazy. So this is what we want to see. We want to see more of these flat lines. Yes, it has gone up, but what we don't want to see, we don't want to see this. This is a lot of like, third world countries. We live in the United States, right? We have a strong economy. And yeah, did I stop screen sharing? Can any, is my, can anyone not see my screen? Anyone else?
Title. Unless it's
I
only
see it.
me. Oh, that's weird.
All right.
It's okay.
Yeah,
If
look,
it's just me, personal technical
all right, all right. Yeah, it looks like yeah, we might have a little bit of a glitch, but it looks like it's here. And I think one of the biggest things, like as we're looking at this, guys, like this is what scares our consumers, right? It's like, oh my God, we live in the United States and we don't know what our rate, what the cost of money is going to look like. And I think that's what scared a lot of people off, right? Like we go look at like this, like look at this. These are high highs and low lows. Like as we're going through this is 2 years worth of data. And we're looking at this thing, and this is what scares someone to put their home on the market because if homes are sitting on the market longer, which they are, and we don't know what interest rates look like in a month from now, that's where people go, oh my God, I could be homeless. I could sell my home that actually works for what I need. And I want to go buy something because I'm having, another family member being added or something, but they don't know what the cost of money is going to be in a month from now. This is what scares our consumers. And so when we're seeing this, and while yes, it has gone up, but it's flat, this gives people some relief. They can actually say, you know what? Nothing crazy is happening. This doesn't look like a roller coaster. The roller coaster up and down with the cost of money is actually what scares people away. So, yes, it is a little bit higher, especially when we look at the 3 month, right? Like we were over here, like this was fun. We're like 6.43 and 6.21. And now we're sitting at 6.8 and 6.3. It's still pretty flat for a month now. And so this is what makes people feel better about borrowing money and putting their home on the market. So then we're going through and we saw that, right? Like we're talking about this and we're actually seeing that we have way more inventory. This is what makes people feel better about selling their house. So let's look at Arvada. Let's look at AAA2. Let's look at Altos data, which is going to be interesting. So I don't know if anyone's played with this recently, but it actually made me sign in today. So I don't know what this is going to look like for the future. Let's just hope that, right, they made me sign in and everything. So let's see what this looks like. But as of right now, it's still free. Median list price, 649. So it's gone up a little bit and then flattened out. Median new listing, 535. Price per square foot, 429. Average days on market, 90 days, 3 months versus median days on market, 67. So again, the conversation I'm having, right? Average, we're taking all the different variables, right? We're taking the homes that are priced to sell, and we're taking the homes where I got a dollar amount that I need, and I'm only going to sell it, so put it on at this price. They're taking all those numbers, they're adding them up, they're dividing them by the total, we get the average. The median, they're removing all the outliers, and they're going right to the middle number. There's the median. I'm having the conversation. I'm at the dining room table. I am talking to the consumer about listing their home. We're figuring out what their motivations are. Why am I here today? What is your goal? Is it most amount of money? Is it the least amount of time? Awesome. Why is that important to you? Where are you moving? When do you need to be there by? What does that look like if you are not there on your timeline? This is the conversation. This is the report that I am bringing with me to have a conversation about the difference, 2 months versus 90 days. And you know what? With this 90-day one, I'm going to jump to this price decrease. If we live in these 90 days, I know that you think that your home, okay, it's an extra month and then I'll be able to get my price. Not necessarily. I think that when we're talking about these 90-day people, they're the ones that are pushing this 50% price decrease. The rest of the nation, around 38%. Arvada, 8 triple lot 2 specifically, 50%. And I'm telling you, it's these 90-day people that are taking that number down. Then you are chasing the market. You are stigmatizing your property at that point. Figure out what the motivation is, have the conversation. Price increases, that's 0%, which is kind of interesting because I told you that number doesn't really excite me. But that really goes into new builds, right? Like I'm looking at new builds and I see that we're going through here and we are living as Colorado, we're at 4.6% in the west of new builds, and yet we haven't seen a new phase. This is a new phase to me. This is going to phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 of their new builds, and we're seeing it that it's at 0%. So they're staying flat. So that tells me that while they're not lowering their prices, they also didn't raise any prices. That's what that's telling me. So 0%, we're not seeing any crazy increases in prices for new builds. Relisted properties, though, is 8%, kind of flat. And so again, we have more discerning buyers with the cost of money being where it is, especially in Colorado, that we're seeing homes fall out of contract. So I think it's very important as we're going through and having conversations with our consumer before they go and they spend money on the inspection and maybe the appraisal and some other things that are happening. And we're seeing a lot of contingent offers. So I think that if we're going through in a contingent offer right now, and we have to know that it's probably a domino effect where we could see up to 3 contingencies attached to one home, like that's very real right now, right? Where we have the buyer of home B is contingent, home B is contingent on buying home C, and C is contingent to buy their home based off of B being able to buy their home. So we're seeing contingencies. We need to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success and we're actually putting more time and we're having the conversation with the listing agent to make sure that they understand, like, hey, are we all on the same page? Median rent, we already talked about that 2,700. Market action report 46, which is kind of interesting. We've been looking at a seller's market, which is where we're at, and the seller's market has been significantly like living in this gray area, and it hasn't been as good as previous months. But now we're better. And again, I think it's because more people are waking up. Interest rates that are pretty steady right now. They're not that roller coaster going up and down. There's more inventory on the market. We need to be making sure that we're having as many conversations with our consumers as possible because more people are looking to buy and sell real estate.